Good evening everyone and welcome to an Oz Cyclone Chasers Cyclone video update tonight, the 25th of March 2014. My name's Chris Nitzo. Tonight we'll talk about the Queensland rain event, we'll talk about some thunderstorm activity expected over the Pilbara, and also we will talk about long-term projections in terms of cyclone development. There are just some hints and some signs of a weak low in the far northern Coral Sea in the future, and there's also just the hint of something forming way out in the Indian Ocean west of Western Australia in the 2-week range, but nothing concrete. But we'll have a quick chat about those at the end. So tonight's update probably a bit shorter than most. We'll also firstly have a look at the life of Tropical Cyclone Gillian. Well, it's a big contrast between Tropical Cyclone Gillian in 1997, which was the last time we had a Cyclone Gillian. She was a Category 1 cyclone and eventually died just to the north of Townsville and just crossed the coast as a very weak low, just got sheared away. But this Tropical Cyclone Gillian, a much more intense system. Right around about the same time we were starting to watch Haiti in early March, we had a very weak low develop just here to the north of Cooktown and then track in a northwesterly direction across the Cape into the Gulf, and it first formed into a tropical cyclone right here in the northern Gulf of Carpentaria. It pushed towards the southeast and hit the coast around Cape Kiawea. Then it sort of meandered very slowly down the coast, and then pushed in a westerly direction. Once it died, it pushed in a westerly direction out here. And it took a little bit of time to get itself going, and once it started to push northeast, it encountered some favourable conditions and redeveloped into a tropical cyclone out here to the northeast or to the east of Gove, and then sort of tracked just to the north of the top end coast as a low, and then continued to track as a low all the way out to Indonesia and crossed the Indonesian archipelago, and then from there it pushed in a westerly direction, and once it got to around about Christmas Island, which is just here, it suddenly encountered some very favourable atmospheric conditions, very low wind shear, very favourable upper level environment for the system, plus it had 30-degree sea surface temperatures, or 29 to 30-degree sea surface temperatures, and she was all systems go, and the thing turned into a Category 5 from a Category 1 near Christmas Island to a Category 5 all in the space of about 36 hours. Now, similarly, it has weakened just as quickly. Once it was a Category 5, it remained so for almost a day, and now has weakened back to a Category 2, possibly now very close to being an X-cyclone, in fact, as it's tracked basically due south. Now, once it becomes an X-cyclone, it is expected to track out here to the west. It's not expected to come towards the Queensland coast, towards the WA coastline in any way, not even its remnants. So, it's just being sheared away now dreadfully, and if I show you the latest satellite pictures so you can compare, this is Gillian at its peak a couple of days ago. You can see a beautiful little eye there right in the center of the system. This was a really intense system, folks. And this is all that's left of her right now. So this is the circulation center out here, and the actual circulation, the actual thunderstorm activity from the system is located a long way further to the south, and it really is on its last legs right now. So that stuff out here, this thunderstorm activity is pushing in a southeast direction, but the low-level circulation center is pushing in a westerly direction. So we've basically got shear that goes from the low-level part of the system wants to push that way, the upper-level part of the system wants to push that way, and because those forces act against each other, the system is dying. And earlier today we had a much better image of the system. You can see here the circulation center so far away from the actual deep convection of the system, so it is really on its last legs. Nevertheless, if the system dies tomorrow, it would have been around for around about 20 days or 21 days. So that's 3 weeks. That's very long time for a cyclone. The record is about a month or just over a month, and it was recorded, I'm not exactly sure of the name of the system, but a number of years back now, but it won't come close to a record. In terms of its intensification, though, it is certainly in the top 10 to 15 tropical cyclones in the Australian basin that have intensified so rapidly. In fact, it is definitely in the top 10 tropical cyclones in terms of its rapid intensification. It went from Category 1 to Category 5 in around about 36 hours. So it'll be interesting to see if the Bureau does a roundup of this system to see exactly what records it may have broken or got close to breaking. The other thing that is killing the system, as well as the amazing amount of wind shear that you can see here, is this dry air. See this brown stuff back here, and the lighter or the darker grey stuff here is very, very dry air. There's not much moisture in the atmosphere in and around the circulation, so that's also doing its best to kill it as quickly as possible. So the shear alone is enough to kill it at the moment. It's 30 to 40 knots, but when we add the dry air to it, it kills it very quickly, and that's why it's weakened so rapidly in the past 24 hours. Well, that's where we'll leave Tropical Cyclone Gillian. What an amazing journey for the system. Now, if we look at today's rainfall, we can see that the rainfall overall has been centralised in the Queensland eastern half, and we've seen that Cairns to Townsville area receiving the most rainfall, as well as other exposed parts of the coastline here. Unfortunately, for a lot of these parts of the coastline, the rainfall wasn't as heavy as initially forecast. We thought that there was a chance there of 100 plus millimetres for some parts of this coastline. But what happened is we had a surface trough that sort of just stuck out here, just off the coast, particularly in the North Queensland area, and it never actually made it onshore. And so because of that, a lot of the rain remained offshore. Now, had that surface trough made it onshore, we could have been seeing falls of 1 to 200 millimetres. Instead, we're seeing falls overall of 25 to 100 millimetres along the coastline. And we're seeing some really good falls over southern and central inland parts of Queensland. Obviously, anywhere west of the trough lines, you're not going to see any rainfall whatsoever. We also saw some pretty good shower and storm activity over the top end coast, particularly the northwestern top end, and some parts of the Kimberley, and even the Pilbara-Gascoyne area scored some pretty decent rainfall in some thunderstorm activity. So if we backtrack a week, we can see how much rain has fallen on parts of the Queensland coast from Cooktown down to about Ingham. We've seen falls of overall over 200 millimetres, some parts up to 400 millimetres, which is just phenomenal rainfall. It is more, I know those places normally get quite good rainfall, but not that good, not over 1 week. So that is quite phenomenal rainfall. Now that was all due to ex-tropical cyclone Haiti, and combining with a moist easterly flow and a surface trough in the Coral Sea. And the last part of that is due to the current system at the moment, which is an upper level low located here over New South Wales, and it's with it is producing an upper level trough, and we also have a surface trough in through inland Queensland, and we've also got that little trough offshore on the Queensland coastline. So all of those things combined are creating a mega rainfall situation and a rainfall event for Queensland. Once again, we have seen a temporary increase in shower and storm activity over the Pilbara and Kimberley region, so we've seen some pretty decent falls according to this map here, just to the west of Broome, or just even near Broome itself. And we've also seen some pretty decent falls, as I said, particularly in the past day or two around the Gascoyne area, which weren't really well modelled, so that was really good news for them and not well modelled. So if we look at totals since 9 a.m, we can see once again moderate falls of rain along the Herbert-Burdekin coastline, particularly the Burdekin coastline in fact. Also some decent falls to the north of Cairns there again, and really the central coast and further south towards the Hervey Bay coast and towards the southeast Queensland coast have been the recipients of today's rainfall, and particularly some fairly large rainfall totals out towards between the Brisbane and Maroochydore area. So some pretty big rainfall totals there, which is fantastic news. This is an area of the coast that has missed out for almost 12 months, believe it or not, in terms of rainfall, and it's great to see them finally getting some and going to continue to get some into the future. So let's have a look at a satellite image, and then let's have a look at the projected rainfall totals. It's so sad to see such a beautiful looking tropical cyclone looking so ugly right now. So this is tropical cyclone Gillian out here. You can see all that convection is being sheared away. The good news is it's creating a little bit of rain here and cloudy conditions for the west coast of Western Australia, which is fantastic, but that is no direct impact from the cyclone whatsoever. That's more of a trough system that's creating all that, and the cyclone pumping in some moisture from the north, particularly in the upper levels, some of the outflow there of its thunderstorms. Now as we head towards the top end of the territory, we see those showers and storms, this time more located towards the northern top end and northeastern top end. We also see some of that rainfall around the Gascoyne region, Pilbara, inland Pilbara region, also receiving some shower and storm outflow activity from that tropical cyclone. And as we head, and the trough system, not just the cyclone itself, as we head towards Queensland, this is where it's all happening. We have an upper level low out here. You can see it, just the outskirts of it, spinning around as it heads westwards, and with it is an upper trough, and we see some fairly large rainfall amounts, as I showed you just before, in that Mackay to Brisbane region, and we can see that's where the area of the thickest cloud lies. There's some really good storm activity in here, though, and in that storm activity, because there's a lot of moisture being pumped in from the Coral Sea, we're going to see some very big rainfall totals in that thunderstorm activity. So we've got an east to northeasterly flow into that storm activity, which is developing right along that trough line. And as that inflow of warm air comes in, it gets uplifted, and because this is an upper level low, what happens in the upper levels is we have much colder air than we would normally see. So that warm air is lifted quite vigorously and quite strongly up very high into the atmosphere, and because of the amount of moisture that air carries, and because of the amount of uplift available, we see some fairly high and strong rainfall totals in these thunderstorms, and we will continue to do so for the next 2 to 3 days. So tomorrow, anywhere south of about Ingham is still going to see some pretty decent rain, all the way down to Hervey Bay. We'll see most of the guidance is suggesting the southeast Queensland little donut hole here of not heavy falls, but we're still going to see some rain in that area. It's just a matter of you won't see the heaviest falls in that area. But here is where it's all happening. Inland southern and inland central Queensland is where it's all happening. 50 to 100 mils tomorrow expected in that area. As I said, that warm air coming off the Coral Sea creating those really heavy thunderstorm falls and general thunderstorm falls, as well as just those thunderstorms, once they do their thing, they spread out into general rain areas as they push in an easterly or southeasterly direction. So they're really going to hammer this area full of rain. But as I say, anywhere south of about Ingham is going to see some moderate to heavy falls of rain tomorrow. As we head to Thursday, we're going to see an even bigger amounts of rain, or even larger amounts of rain. That was good English, wasn't it, Nitso? Larger amounts of rain here over southern inland Queensland, and also we're going to see an increase in activity right along the Hervey Bay coastline is what most models are suggesting. So possible falls there of 50 to 100 millimetres, and inland we could actually be seeing really some flooding rains by that stage. This will be the second day in a row in the same area that we're going to see some fairly heavy or very heavy rainfall. So do be aware that there will be some flood warnings very likely to be out by the end of Thursday based on the current projections on the guidances. We also continue to see, and we saw on Wednesday too, that just those isolated showers and storms coming in on the trough system along the Western Australian coastline and also on the Pilbara-Kimberley, and we're going to see that again on Thursday. And as we head to Friday, we're going to see probably a weakening of that shower and storm activity, much more isolated then. And we're also going to start to see really most of the rainfall in Queensland being located right along the coast on the Friday, as that upper trough and surface trough start to push eastwards and exit the state. But still, we're going to see enough moisture lingering back in through here to create isolated showers, maybe even some isolated thunderstorms as well. Western Peninsula looks like it's going back into a little bit more of activity on the Friday. And then as we head to Saturday, we really see most of that rain has now exited the coast on the weekend, which is great. But we're still left with some pretty cloudy and isolated shower conditions all along the coastal strip and the fringe, so the hinterland region of the coast as well through here in Queensland. Also looking at some more moisture now coming back into the top end of the territory. So you can see here the couple of days before that, so Wednesday nothing, Thursday nothing, Friday just a hint of something coming back, and then Saturday we actually see some fairly, not widespread, but isolated to scattered shower and storm activity out here in the top end, as winds tend a little bit more east to northeasterly in the area. We should see a little bit more moisture in that region. Now, once all that rain clears Queensland, what we're looking for on the Sunday is just this area out here of lower pressure out in the between the Solomon Islands and Fiji area. Now, that low pressure will drift westwards over the coming few days. Now, this is out to Sunday. Most of the ensemble is picking up some element of lower pressure there. At this stage, not a recognised surface circulation as such, but just an area of enhanced vorticity or enhanced lower pressure. And by Tuesday, you can see it looks more like a trough type system out here between the Solomons and Vanuatu, but definitely pushing westwards, or not really pushing westwards, more so drifting to the west very, very slowly. You can see by Thursday and Friday next week, we see the system located in the Solomon Sea or the far northeastern Coral Sea. And once again, not quite sure whether this is now a tropical low or whether it'll just be a fairly broadish trophy type system as such. So it's still too far away and there's still a lot of model disagreement on it, but it will be something that we'll need to watch as we head towards days 8 to 10. There does look to be a fairly nice area for development in that region. So if there is a low pressure system there could just be the hint that it might intensify as we head towards the 2-week range. So it looks like this whole area will be quite dominated by ridging, both in the surface and the mid-levels. So at this point in time, the conditions look pretty favourable up there, out to about 10 to 14 days. It's just a matter of, will there be a low there to speak of, and if there is, then we'll need to watch it very closely. And the reason we need to watch it that closely is because at the moment we're looking at a fairly active Rossby wave pushing westwards across the Pacific Ocean. Once again, I don't have time to explain what these are, so please Google them if you'd like to know more. But that Rossby wave will continue pushing west very, very slowly as we head towards days 1 to 5. And then by days 6 to 10, which is around about the time we're looking at that low in the Solomons, that Rossby wave should be located directly over the top of where that low is forming. So we do need to be mindful that conditions could be conducive as we head towards day 10 to 14 and the system lies in this area, especially if these Rossby wave projections come off and they do come true. We could certainly be looking at increased chances of cyclone development in that time frame, even though the MJO is very unfavourable at the time. The Canadian CMC ensemble is also on board with something forming out here in the Solomon Sea, although once again I do caution when we do use this, we only use it as a very, very broad idea, and we'd only use it if another model is showing us something. The Canadian CMC model is wrought with inaccuracies when we start looking at tropical cyclone formation. But the good thing is that the European is showing something quite similar, although definitely nowhere near the extent of this particular model. This one just wants to spin up cyclones everywhere, whereas the European is much safer and much more reserved about this sort of thing. But you can see here just generally that the Canadian is quite intent on forming something, it just doesn't know where. And it really probably trying to form it a little bit too quickly. So this is the European suggesting we've got a weak low or trough feature out here. The Canadian suggesting a full-blown tropical cyclone that could be located here or here. So at this point in time, I'm much more inclined to go with the European. But the interesting thing is that the Euro and the Canadian are going for a similar setup, if you like, if the end result is quite different. Even though the end result is quite different, I should say. The MJO is currently in phases 1 and 2 and just doesn't want to budge. It does show signs of intensifying again as we head to phase 1 and 2, but it really doesn't want to budge eastwards, and we really need it to budge eastwards, and we want it to do it quickly because we can't afford the MJO sitting through phase 2 and 3 through all the way through to the end of April and then finally deciding it wants to come towards Australia, because that's too late. It's not going to have any impact on us by then. So we really need it to make up its mind whether it's going to be a feature, and if it does become a feature, we need it to push eastwards nice and rapidly over the next 2 to 3 weeks if it's going to feature in our end of wet season conditions. So at this stage, if we have a look at the current projections of the MJO from different model guidances, And if we take a look at the European modelling projection of the MJO, we see that it's going to stall here in between phase 1 and 2, which is exactly what it's doing right now. So it's got that part right. And then it basically pushes east fairly rapidly until it gets to about mid-phase 3, which is the central to southeast Indian Ocean. Then it sort of stalls in phase 3 and starts to weaken just before it makes it to Australia, which is not great news, which means that we may not see the MJO become a factor in the final part of the Australian wet season if this particular projection comes true. Now, we've got a lot of model guidance now suggesting that the MJO will be indiscernible by the time it gets into the Australian region. There is still some model guidance hopeful that it will remain moderate or low in intensity, but just enough to create something for us as we head towards mid-April, mid to late April. But with the current conditions, with the Rossby Wave that I just showed you earlier pushing westwards, there are other factors. It's not just the MJO that drives the tropical weather in Australia. The other factors like Rossby Waves can be just as lethal when it comes to tropical cyclone development potential. If we look at a 2-week model update from the European, which is a little bit more recent and a little bit more accurate, we see the same sort of thing. It gets to about mid-phase 3 and then just dies, which is just it's really disappointing. But there are still guidances that suggest that the system, the MJO, will remain a weak feature at least into phase 4. We really want it in phase 4, 5, and 6 if we want to see another cyclone, and we want it in phase 5 and 6 if we want to see widespread rain over the far north of the continent. At this stage, that's looking less and less likely. Looking at the UK Met has it stalling around phase 3 and dying as well. So there is pretty good guidance there, pretty good agreement between the major global models that the MJO is unlikely to be a dominant feature in our weather as we head towards the end of the wet season. But there is time enough for it to change, and fingers crossed it does change, because I know particularly northwestern WA would love one last bout of wet weather in April. Alright folks, thanks for watching tonight, and our next update, because there are no cyclone threats, is on Friday. We hope that you enjoy the rain in Queensland. We hope that if you need rain, you get it. We really sincerely hope that you do get it, and look, for many parts of Queensland that have missed out on rainfall, you are going to get it. So good luck, and we'll talk Friday. Good night.